It's time to get sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Just like dancing to the music.
Right, and chair dancing is about the only thing I can do, so I really try to take advantage of these 30 seconds every week.
Yes. So, hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality. I am Megan, and with me, as always, is my co-host.
Howdy, I'm Christy.
And today, our topic is, do you want to tell them?
Yeah, so we decided that it was about damn time that Megan be introduced to FetLife.
Woohoo!
So we're going to be discussing Fet and kink in general, as well as, just kind of what it's like coming from your perspective to be diving into this, sex talk every week. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay. So I got introduced to FetLife this week. It was definitely an interesting experience, not to mention... I'm pretty sure that whoever is running FetLife is still stuck in the MySpace era, because it definitely looks like it.
Yeah, not the world's greatest website from a design perspective, for sure.
They call GUI, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable because it is in so many ways the gold standard and like the center of the kink community in so many different ways, and yet you're right, it looks like something that an AV nerd made in a janitor's closet.
Yes, but to be honest, past the whole interface, some of the pictures on there are pretty interesting and enticing.
Yeah, interesting, enticing, and, a little shocking some of the time.
Yes. I can definitely say yes, they were.
Hey, we can both acknowledge that just because it's not your kink doesn't mean it's not okay.
Right. Your kink is not my kink, but your kink is okay.
Absolutely. We can still acknowledge that there's a, let's call it a visceral reaction to a lot of what exists out in the sex world.
Yes.
Yes. To put it gently.
Yeah, that's probably the nicest, easiest, best way to put it.
Yeah. So what was it like, going through and answering those questions about yourself and kind of for the first time in that formal way, having to define yourself or describe yourself?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, Google Dictionary really helped me a lot. Because
I can appreciate that.
There's a portion where you identify, yourself, and it gives this long ass list of endless different descriptions.
So many adjectives.
Oh my God. And I went through and I'm like, I don't know this word. I don't know this word. I don't know. Okay, Google, help me out here. What the And, eventually I was able to really narrow it down to one very simple one, which was switch.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, it's always important when you're looking to understand these terms to feel comfortable looking them up and reading about them. But I usually recommend doing so with image search turned off, just as a place to start until you are aware of how you feel.
Well, luckily I say define word and then give it the word. So it will actually come up with the dictionary definition and not the whole Google image.
All of the accoutrement that might go along with a particular word.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Any big revelations? I mean, anything that you stumbled across that you were like, I wasn't really aware, but wow, okay, I like that.
Not yet. Mostly because I have not spent too much time on there yet, but this will be a recurring segment, everyone. And we will be checking back with Megan's, I don't know.
Megan through the looking glass, adventures in Fet.
Just the pictures. I mean, I spent way too much time just looking at all the various pictures on there going, oh, that's a thing. Okay. So, yeah.
Well, glad to hear it was a good journey overall.
Yes, for sure. Definitely enlightening.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
let's see how enlightened you are. I've got some questions for you.
Okay.
See how much you've learned at this very early stage of your journey.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
We'll start off gentle.
Thank
Lots
you.
of
It's
lube,
much
lots of
appreciated.
time. Right. Okay.
It's, having a just check in from time to time.
Right.
It's
Okay.
good. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So softball right out the gates.
Yes.
What does BDSM actually stand for?
Bondage.
Uh-huh.
Shun.
Shun. Yeah. Usually.
Yeah, domination. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dominant or domination.
And then our old friends S&M.
Yes. Sadomasochism.
Yeah, sadism and masochism.
Yeah.
All right. Nice.
Yay.
Nice. Okay. Let me ask you this. What is a rope bunny?
Someone who likes to be tied up.
Yeah. All right. Edge play.
That is, if I'm not mistaken, edging into the point of, but not going over orgasm.
Oh.
No?
Great answer. Not right.
Oh,
but
fuck.
Yeah, definitely, tease and denial play and
Okay.
edging. And yeah, edge play, though, is usually the term that we use for kinks that might be more dangerous or just that require a lot of extra safety, a lot of extra consent talk, and that,
Pineapple.
could potentially go the wrong way if they're not done properly.
Gotcha.
How about wax play?
That is, I'm fairly certain, hot wax.
Yeah, melting candles
Yeah.
and the pain from that. Okay. All right. A little bit harder. What is figging?
I did say I didn't spend too
Yeah,
much
that's
time
not
on
usually
FetLife.
a week one FetLife question. I just thought, I'd throw it out there and see how you did.
I honestly, a lot of images are coming to mind, but none that are probably applicable or helpful.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. For you out there, in case
And
you
me.
were curious or interested, figging is where you take a piece of ginger and
Okay.
you're peeling
heard
it
this,
down
yes.
into various shapes, which can then be utilized as a penetrative device.
Gotcha.
Right. So it's it's
Natural, what do you call it? Chemically in it, like
it's that chemical
that
burn that
yeah.
comes from like cinnamon or peppers or whatever. So yeah, it's a form of like a chemical burn pain play
Yes.
of various sorts.
Gotcha.
Okay, so let me dial it up a notch. You got pretty much all of those.
Okay.
All right, doing okay. Okay, what is the word for the thing where you enjoy sex in public places or out in public?
Exhibitionists.
Yeah,
Or
exhibitionism, agoraphilia. Yeah. What's the word for the thing where you have an affinity for needles or pins, knives, sharp objects, things like that?
Now I'm going through all the Latin and Greek in my head.
Uh-huh.
Is it one of those base words? Now
You know
I
what?
feel like I'm like on a spelling bee where
Just
I'm
throw
like, give me
affiliate
the
in there.
root word.
Yeah. Can you use it in a sentence, please?
Yeah.
Sarah really liked knife play.
I do know.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
knife play, or if you do want to be fancy and educated, it is balenophilia.
Balenophilia.
Although I've literally never heard anybody use that word, it is a proper, more sophisticated terminology.
It's the textbook definition.
Okay. I feel like you're getting ready to get this one.
Okay.
What's the thing for where you enjoy hitting, squeezing, hurting, either the penis or the testes?
You think I'm gonna get this?
Yeah, it's some sort of like pain or torture to the penis or the cock, the testes.
cock and ball
or the ball.
torture.
Yeah, okay.
CBD, sorry.
I fed
Yes.
that one to you? That doesn't
Yes.
feel right.
No.
Okay, yeah, you kind of hit on this one. What's the word for the thing where you're not allowed to orgasm or you're only allowed to orgasm with like your dominant's permission?
Well, my guess is already gone.
Yeah. Okay.
No, that would have been edging.
Edging. Yeah. So that's for some people it's just a really long bad marriage. For other people, it's called chastity and denial play.
Ah. Okay.
Okay. All right. Last one. I promise.
Okay.
What's the word for the thing where you insert a glass or metal rod into the urethra?
Oh, I've heard about this.
The audience is emphatically screaming this out. I'm very surprised,
I did
but
not
a little
hear it or
delighted.
see it.
This is great. You trying to read lips out there?
I'm trying to read lips, but I can't.
Yeah, I don't blame you. This was a surprising one on me. It's actually not terribly uncommon. It's called sounding.
Sounding. Okay.
And it's not for the faint of heart.
It doesn't
would
sound
just say.
like it.
Yeah, it's a form of edge play. It's fairly intense.
I would think so.
So just forewarned is forearmed as you dive deeper and deeper into the
FetLife world.
warm, embracing hug of the FetLife world. So just be on the lookout for that. I'd be very curious to hear where you're at a month from now in terms of, self-discovery and, just becoming comfortable.
I will be very interested to find out myself. Yeah, it's, like I said, I didn't spend a lot of time on there, but I am honestly kind of excited and interested to find out, what things I did not know were things that I might like.
Yeah, I think that's such a huge part of it is, part of the reason we're doing this show is to expose people to the giant buffet of options so that they can all of a sudden realize, I had no idea there was a word for that, but
Right.
apparently I really like it.
Yeah. And maybe not necessarily the word, but the act. The act could be fun.
Any final takeaways before we check in next month?
Wish me luck.
Absolutely.
That's about it.
Well, fair enough. Who could blame you?
Anyway, okay. So, our show was, we are not the original creators of this show. This show was originally created by Dr. Darrel Ray. And we actually have him on the line. Due to some scheduling issues, we weren't able to have him on last week, but we are able to have him on today.
Yeah, I did enjoy, especially since I wasn't able to be there, watching the interviews that you were able to do with him. As he talked about sort of his vision for the show and the values that went into it. And then hopes for the future, as he was talking about getting these different guests on and all of these places that we want to explore. I know, as somebody who's been in on all the production meetings and, part of putting that together, I was really excited to hear about sort of his vision for our future together. Yeah,
and getting to meet him was a great pleasure. And to keep you all in suspense not much longer, we have him on the line with us. Darrel, are you there?
I am here. Thanks.
Hey!
Howdy, thank you for joining us.
Great.
How did you feel Megan did on our very intro to fetish and kink quiz?
Terribly.
Well, I think Johnny Carson would have been in danger if she'd have been
For probably more than a few reasons, but yeah.
She did great. I loved it. Loved watching it.
Awesome. So, Darrel, you have your own thoughts regarding the show and regarding kink and fetish communities alike.
Oh yeah, I love talking about this stuff, and I'm glad. Boy, I'm glad Megan, you were the one that got the quiz and not me.
Oh, if only it could have not been me.
Yeah, I love speaking with folks from the academic world about the scholarly academic aspects of sex and particularly kink, because I will be surrounded by professionals, and all of a sudden somebody will drop a word like figging or sounding, and you can tell who partakes, and who studies, just by their mastery of the vocab. Yeah, and the reaction in general.
By way back when I was first getting started as a counselor, doing my early studying and an internship, one of my very first clients had a fetish around figging, and I was fucking shocked. I was a good Christian boy. What are you doing that for?
Yeah. Well, I mean, but now I am guessing you have expanded your horizons quite a bit more, and that's probably not the most shocking thing that you have encountered.
I'm a degree or two wider than I used to be, that's for sure. I would make a very bad Christian boy today.
So would I.
Although some girls like bad Christian boys, I'm just saying.
Man, growing up in that world, the preacher's kids had a very definite allure to them.
Oh, they did. Man, preacher's kid at our church camp, he always had tear-outs from Playboy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was a huge
else.
stereotype. PKs were always the bad kids.
Yeah.
Nobody else dared bring pornography there, but he had entire fold-outs of Playboy, yeah.
Hey.
I'm sure he stole it straight from his dad.
I wouldn't doubt it. Well, we've spent a lot of time on this show talking about how, regardless of where these predilections, these kinks, these different interests come from, that it's okay, so long as it's safe, consensual, enjoyable. I mean, we definitely want to support people in being open and enjoying these things. But from an academic standpoint, I'm interested to hear your take on, I guess, a little bit of where these things come from. Not that that's always important, but I do think that, our wants and our desires, maybe we love blueberry pancakes because we have great memories of our parents making them when we were kids. How does that maybe apply? What does that look like when we're talking about something like inserting ginger into your vagina?
Right.
Other orifices.
Or other orifices.
Yeah, right. Been there, done that. Interesting. I think it's important to frame it so that you know what specifically you're talking about. And I think of it kind of like a funnel or a sideways funnel. If you can imagine a funnel that instead of going up and down, it goes sideways. And on the left-hand side, you've got vanilla. It's a fairly restricted set of behaviors that are allowed. Then you move to the middle and you get kink. And kink is like the spice that opens up vanilla, I guess you could say. And then on beyond that is fetish. At the widest part of the funnel are fetishes. So if you think about that in that conceptual framework, it helps you know what you're talking about. And it's a continuum. It's not a hard and fast cutoff point anywhere.
So you don't separate kink and fetish out in these sort of discrete boxes. You see them as existing on a spectrum?
I really do, and I think they do overlap. Sometimes it's really hard to tell if somebody's got a kink or a fetish. Mm-hmm. Other times it's obvious they've got a fetish. And other times they just have a kink because they only want to do it once a year. Mm-hmm. Well, you got a fetish, you're going to want to do it almost every time. Whereas a kink, let's try tying up tonight and then tomorrow we'll do some spanking. But the fetishes are, can't even be compulsive. Fetishes can be really important. An author I read one time said, kink is the spice and fetish is the meat.
Okay.
It's kind of and that doesn't really answer your question, Christy, of where they come from, but it does frame it. Because I think most people have got a kink. It may be mild, and I'm not saying everybody does, but I would guess 90% of the people, male and female, have got some kind of kink. Now, they could be so minor as to be almost unrecognizable to some people. Mm-hmm. But a fetish, though, is so powerful in the mind of the person that they almost have to have it to orgasm, or almost have to have it, or some representation of it, either in reality or in fantasy, to actually come to orgasm or to enjoy themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just had so many different clients, and I've interviewed lots and lots of people over the years, and I found that there's a lot of fetishes among men, and there's a lot of fetishes among women. I think men are more fetishizing than women are, in my observation. I think there's some science behind that. There
are a lot of really interesting theories. It definitely seems to be sort of anecdotal, that's the nature of it, that the hardcore fetishists, the folks that maybe rely or are in some way dependent on a particular stimulus in order to orgasm or to enjoy their sexuality, are almost exclusively men. And there's some interesting ideas as to why that get into philosophy and evolutionary psychology, which is kind of the alchemy of the psychology world, not without value, but definitely reaching in some instances.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't mean to derail that. I guess what I wanted to clarify is, for you, the sort of the cutoff maybe between a fetish and a kink, even if we're not putting them in discrete packages, is whether or not it's necessary for all or most of your sexual expression. Does that seem right?
It comes close, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think somebody who, I see it as behavioral flexibility, and people who are highly fetishized are really restricted in their behavioral flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
It does to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that I follow, and that seems to line up, I think.
With your personal experience?
Right.
Yeah, with just everything that you hear and see, and just the way that people talk about these things. Mm-hmm. And we call it FetLife, and we talk about the fetish world, but I feel like that term fetish is almost, I don't want to say passé by any means, because it's still in very common use, but I feel like most people that get into the lifestyle, that talk about BDSM, are really talking about more of a kink orientation than anything else for the majority of the time.
Mm.
Yeah, I think people overuse the word fetish. And they think, well, I like to have my butt spanked once a month. That's not a fetish. That's a kink.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If somebody likes pain, if they have to have pain, no matter what, during sex, then that may be a fetish or something like that.
Yeah, well, and I don't want to get too into the weeds, but how would you separate out a kink or a fetish versus a paraphilia or a disorder? At what point does it become problematic?
Yeah, I think that's why use the term behavioral flexibility, because a fetish, if something becomes compulsive, then it restricts the person in their sexual expression in some ways, and it can be very frustrating to them. It can be just as frustrating to their partner, and it actually takes a person and maybe even a couple down a dead end road. So at that point in time, it becomes a problem. Now, whether you want to call it a paraphilia or not, I wouldn't go there. I would just say, if it's causing a problem, then you need to look at it. And the problem is behavioral flexibility. If you can't open yourself up to options and opportunities, and you're restricted to one or two, and I do know that. I see it a lot in clients and people I interview. They're stuck and they can't get out. And they actually need some help, because they're probably not going to get out on their own, and it's very frustrating to them.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, what sorts of things help to, I guess, increase flexibility? Or is that even the goal of therapy or other forms of treatment?
Well, I think the goal is to help people be more satisfied with their sex life.
Sure.
And that oftentimes, though not every time, means they're going to have to look at ways to broaden their perspectives. Sometimes fetishes are related to, as you said, hinted at earlier, Christy, early childhood experiences. And so if they are, and those are traumatic, then maybe those need to be examined. Maybe some cognitive behavioral or dialectical behavioral stuff needs to be worked with in the client. But that's not the solution to everything. It's just people have to be willing to look at it. And when people say, I read one of the commenters from last week say, well, anybody that engages in X, Y, or Z has been abused as a child. That's just simply not true. There's no evidence for that. Mm-hmm. But there are people who have been abused or have experienced trauma, mm-hmm. and it leads to fetishes, at which point they need to deal with the underlying emotional issue it's not the fetish that's the problem, it's the underlying emotional obsession or the way they're dealing with the emotional trauma.
Mm-hmm. So that rigidness or that restriction in their sexuality is generally a symptom of something else.
Yeah, generally. It's hard to say, and I'm not an expert on somebody I've never talked to.
Sure.
And even if I have, I'm not the expert on them personally. So you have to be careful making too big of assumptions. Mm-hmm. But going back to what the question you said earlier, there are times, especially that we think, that's why males seem to be more fetishizing than females, that there are times in both in the fetus and in late childhood and early adolescence, 3 different times when there's massive amounts of testosterone being injected into a system, as a person. And at those times, especially in that pre-adolescent, late childhood time, children are looking around. Their brains are actually asking the question, in an evolutionary sense, what is attractive in my culture? Mm-hmm. Because eventually they're going to have to mate in that culture. Mm-hmm. To be generic is to not be successful at mating. So humans' brains are programmed not to look for a specific red-tailed feathers, as maybe some birds would do, but to look for what everybody else seems to be attractive and then lock in on that. And that's even before adolescence. Mm-hmm. Well, things can happen during that time. What if you see something or you experience something? Maybe your dad spanks you really bad when you're 8 years old and it gets you turned on. That can then become a fetish. And it's not even, it's just the way the human brain is working. That's the time they're looking for sexual signals, if mm-hmm. you will. That's one of the key theories of why fetishes come about. It's not to say women don't have them. I've met many women who say, I can't orgasm unless I'm fantasizing a very specific way. Or mm-hmm. I know I've had a number of women say, I would never want to be tied up, but I love the idea, and I can come just by thinking about being tied up. Mm-hmm. Of course, I've known women who like to be tied up and come, so it can go either way.
So I was curious. You say it seems to be more prevalent in the male, or what we would call male gender. Mm-hmm. But you say that's just for fetish. Do you find that kink tends to be equally distributed across the genders?
I've really never seen any research on that. My own experience would say, yeah, it's pretty evenly distributed. What do you think, Christy?
Yeah, I can't think of a single book or really anything I've read that answers that question, but I would suggest that women are perhaps somewhat more kinky, just from what I've seen, and that could be the type of women I'm attracting. But in any case, there are a lot of really interesting studies on like sexual plasticity and women's ability to potentially be more open and less narrow and rigid in their expression of sexuality, and
that's flexible.
Yeah, and that's perhaps one of the reasons that we see more women identifying as bisexual than men. That can be
and
sticky.
The social stigma.
Yeah, because there might be a lot of reasons why bisexual men don't necessarily see themselves or express that to other people. There are really interesting studies. One that I don't want to get too deep into, but that I found fascinating was surrounding. There have been a number of different studies actually that have taken baby goats and baby sheeps and separated them out from their species of origin. So taking a baby goat and raising it among sheep, and then after puberty and after reaching adulthood, bringing that baby goat who is raised by sheep back into a goat collective to see how it responds sexually to other goats, having been habitualized to being around sheep. And in some cases, they're able to biologically recognize, I'm a goat, I like goats, let's have some goat sex.
Right.
And in other instances, depending on the age of separation and different experimental aspects of it, that hasn't been the case. And in female goats, which are very different from human women, I should emphasize,
very clear,
tend to have a greater amount of flexibility in becoming open sexually to both sheep and to goats. Regardless of, so I'm very dramatically oversimplifying that particular research, but I do think that there's reason to believe that oftentimes women are more prone to be flexible about their sexuality, and I think we see that in the kink community in particular.
There is a book to follow on what you just said, Christy. There's a book I read several years ago called Sexual Fluidity, and it does only focus on women over a long period of time. And the author, can't remember the woman's name, comes to the same conclusion that women are, I think she comes up with five times more sexually fluid. There's 5 times more women who claim to be bisexual than there are men. So there's some of that. I don't know if that can be absolutely quantified, but I remember that from her book.
Well, Darrel, this conversation, it's fascinating, but, we're coming up on the time when we normally take calls. How do you feel about taking calls?
Well, bring it on.
All righty.
Let's do it.
All right, so we are going to be speaking first with Hollis in Houston, who wants to talk about how religion has hindered his sexuality. Hollis, you are on with Megan, Christy, and Darrel.
Oh, hi, how are you doing today?
Good. You wanted to talk to us about how religion has hindered your sexuality?
Yes. I was in the evangelical church for just about 37 years. I was in the church for 37 years. And, of course, it started out as Pentecostal holiness, then went to evangelical, charismatic. But the underlying theme is sex outside of marriage was a no-no. And now that I've left the church, and I'm not say atheist, I'm just having trouble dealing with my sexuality because of all of the kind of taboos associated with it. To the point where I get triggered if I see like sex scenes in movies. Sometimes I just walk out if possible. And trying to form relationships hasn't been too great. I was in a same-sex relationship for a while, but I am bi. Opposite sex hasn't been very successful. So yeah, just putting that out there. Religion does have a very negative aspect on sexuality. You look at what's going on in the Mormon church with this fellow getting excommunicated because he was speaking out against the interviews
Of the
men and women, and then the scandal going on in the Catholic Church, especially this newest revelations in Pennsylvania. So I'm just trying to sort things out. And so I'm just basically trying to sort things out. My mild Asperger's syndrome was also throwing that into the mix, but I'm pretty much trying to get that worked out. But the sexuality part is still kind of,
Yeah, when you say working out, can you tell me what that looks like?
I'm sorry?
When you say, your sexuality hasn't really been working out, what does that actually look like? What does that mean for you?
Just trying to have a relationship with, just trying to have a meaningful relationship. And this case was a woman, because I have been in a relationship with men. Women have worked out too well. Just, normalizing how I view sex. I still kind of get, like I said, triggered when I see it. If it's not, pornography. So, basically, it's just kind of all really jumbled up.
Have you looked into seeing a therapist at all?
Yes. See a therapist. We kind of scratched the surface of that. It has improved. It has basically gotten better.
That's good.
As far as me finally accepting the fact that I am bi. So that's worked out. But as far as starting another relationship with, either the same or the opposite sex, still, running into some hurdles, but it's better than it was before, but, problems still there.
In your work with the therapist, is this therapist knowledgeable about teaching the skills that you need from the Asperger's? I'm speaking mainly from Asperger's perspective.
Yes. We had to end it because I was in Utah at the time and had to move to Texas. So I haven't started seeing another therapist yet, but we were on the verge of starting to do the Asperger's part of that before I had to move. Okay. But from what we were able to do, it did help out a great deal.
Good, because that would be the first place you'd want to look at, is how you develop the skills that would lead to where you want to go. And if that was where the therapist was starting, you have plans to find somebody in Houston area?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you do know about the Secular Therapy Project, and I think you'd find somebody there if you don't already have somebody.
Yeah. Yes, I have heard about that from the Atheist Experience, and I believe the Thinking Atheist with St. Andrews.
Yep.
Right.
And
it's true that religion really does screw up your perceptions. What have you gained? How do you feel like you've changed? Or, I know you're not satisfied with where you're at, but where do you think you've improved or you've become less?
Less awkward, a lot less orientated towards guilt, a little more open, slightly more, I guess, experienced on cues. When somebody's just being friendly or somebody's being a little more than friendly, a little better on that on cues. So in that area, it has improved a lot.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
So, Hollis...
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, did you have any specific questions for us today? Because it sounds like you are making progress, and I think finding a new therapist, definitely easier to do through the Secular Therapy Project would probably be a really good idea.
Yeah, and then doing what you're doing. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but, watching shows like this, listening to different, there are so many great podcasts and so many great sources of information. And honestly, just
Exposure.
Yeah, exactly. Getting the exposure of those different things can really help to lessen some of that. You mentioned feeling triggered by sexuality in a lot of ways. And, when you're watching a movie and it gets really intense and you start to feel overwhelmed by it, I recognize how uncomfortable that can be. And I wouldn't say to ever, rush towards a negative feeling like that. But watching those sorts of movies in a comfortable way, watching shows like this one, to the degree that you feel comfortable doing so, can really help to sort of soften the edges.
Okay, that sounds good. That sounds good. And I also, two more things, because I know you have other callers. The other two things is this. Yes, I, like a lot of other people, I do have a foot fetish, along with, I guess a whole lot of other people do that, so that I'm not, too. And also, I don't know if you're aware of the YouTube creator ContraPoints. I just want to give a shout out to her because she kind of went through the same thing, but hers was more of gender identity, and she finally decided to transition. And I just want to give a shout out to her because she inadvertently helped me kind of get courage to kind of deal with this head on, because she basically put it out there on her videos about her story identity. So just want to give a shout out to for her and congratulate her for starting to make the transition, because for what she was saying in her video, it was getting pretty bad, but she finally made that move. So I just want to congratulate her on that.
Oh, well, yes, I think anyone making that adjustment in their life to become who they feel they are is always a positive step. Yeah,
and sharing that experience with others and helping people to scaffold and to grow off of that. So, absolutely. Thank you so much for calling in, and we really appreciate everything that you're going through. I hope that things continue to move forward and go well.
All right, well, thank you, and thank you for your time.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. All right, well, that was, I think, an important conversation to have. Anyone with who can recognize that they have some trouble finding a therapist that they can work with is important, especially one of the first things if you move to a new area. One of the most important things I've found to do for myself is to find a new therapist. So yes,
setting up the cable, the water, the electric, finding a therapist. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, Darrel, did you have any thoughts before we moved on to another caller?
Just to kind of wrap up what Hollis was saying, he's not the only person in the world that has this kind of issue. So if you're a person, if a listener is a person who has social anxiety or has difficulty relating to other people, those are skills that can be learned, and don't beat yourself up because you didn't learn them as a child. People who have those kinds of social anxieties generally don't learn them as well as other people do, but they can be learned and sure can help make life a lot easier for that person.
Oh, for sure. All right, so we are going to go on to Anthony. Anthony wants to talk about being atheist and bisexual. Anthony, you are on the air with Megan and Christy and Darrel.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I thought I trusted for audio, me and my dad have some issues together. First me being an atheist, and also me being bisexual, since he's a heavy religion guy. And also I want to give out some tips of how the tips get me to help me to explain to my dad is not bad, because I think he's very following the Bible, that you're going to hell, with
all of that shame.
And it was about a year or two ago, I came out bisexual on Facebook, and he was very mad because I think he's one of those homophobic people out
Sure.
there.
Yep.
Being a religion guy, but somehow some of my other family members they don't mind it. So I was wondering if you guys got some tips for me to help me to explain to my dad that it's okay for me to be an atheist and bisexual.
Well, I think.
Could I ask how old you are, and are you still dependent upon your parents?
I about to be 30 this Saturday, and I live by myself.
Okay, but you're not dependent financially on your father?
No, he's like
Okay.
one of those people that never raised me. Just for some technical reason, he just never raised me. And when me and him talk, sometimes it's always about how religion come into play.
Right.
And I'd say, I mean, first and foremost, I think we're proving fairly scientifically that this is being gay or bisexual or anywhere on the, orientation spectrum is not just a human thing. It is a entire animal kingdom thing. I think maybe cracking open a book or two or going onto, even probably just Googling. I don't have any specific websites in mind personally, but I do know that it is prevalent enough in the rest of the animal kingdom that it is not just the humans. And it's, of course, being atheist, I feel very angry at the idea that a particular religion would say that this is in some way bad or shameful, because it's just not true.
Yeah, I know I tried to explain to him, but it doesn't seem like he get it.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. The unfortunate divide, I think, between atheism and theism of most sorts, particularly when we're talking about Christianity and organized religion in the West, is that from their perspective, if they really believe what they believe, that, God has set forth these rules, this is the only way to be, if you are not that, then you will go to hell for all of eternity, then from that perspective, it kind of only makes sense that they would be assholes about it, Yeah. The only way to be kind would be to be constantly beating that drum, because eternity is a really long time. And so from their perspective, there's really not a lot of options. And so that leaves us with somebody that we really don't have a lot of common ground with in some ways. And so when we're trying to express ourselves, that's really, really difficult to do.
And I think at the end of the day, because I have personally had some interactions with family members, at the end of the day, unfortunately, sometimes for your own personal mental and emotional health, you just have to distance yourself from them. If this person is not going to get over their own religious dogma to accept who you are, then maybe it's worth looking at, distancing from that person. If all they're doing is bringing, negativity and shame to your life.
Oh, yeah.
Anthony?
And where are you coming from?
Anthony?
Yes.
Could you kind of give us a thumbnail of how you're living your life now, and how your dad may or may not interfere with it where you're at right now?
Well, I live out in Marietta, Georgia, renting an apartment. My dad is all the way in Houston, Texas.
Okay, so there's a lot of distance. Okay.
Yeah.
But you're living your life pretty much the way you want right now without his interference?
Yes.
Well, congratulations.
I would call that a win.
Yeah, seriously. When we're talking about our relationships with our parents and the judgmentalness and some of the ways that they might condemn the way that we are or the way that we choose to live, one of the only real assets that we have to leverage that relationship is our presence. As adults, we do get to decide how to spend our time, whether or not to come home for Thanksgiving, whether or not to engage in these conversations. And I am by no means saying that everybody should just run screaming from their parents because they disagree with them. But in the same way that you're talking about taking ownership of that relationship and whether or not you feel obligated or desire to spend time around somebody, but also leveraging that a little bit and saying, Dad, I love you, I want to spend time with you, but you've got 5 full minutes to tell me about how I should live as a person, and then after that, if you don't stop, I'm gonna leave. And using that only power that you really have, which is your presence, as a way of sort of dictating the terms of what you do and don't find acceptable in your relationship.
Okay.
And I also think it's very important that you are, in your own way, you are showing him that, someone can live without God and someone can live being bisexual, and that it is not the end of the world. It's actually the beginning of an even better life. And just being the proof that things, how should I say, living proof that it's not a terrible thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I would underline what Christy just said, that what Christy's suggesting is you setting boundaries with your father. You might want to read up on what it means to set boundaries. I'd also recommend you go look at our website, Recovering from Religion website. We have tons of resources on how to talk to religious relatives, how to deal with parents religious. So you might want to go look at some of that. David McAfee has got a good book out called Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist. So there's a lot of resources out there.
But Anthony, I hope that helps you in your journey a little bit.
Oh, it does.
Oh, good. Good. Well, thank you so much for your call.
Yeah, take care. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And I think we've got a few spots left before we jump into the next call. If anybody would like to call in, you do see your number there on the screen, and we would love to hear from you.
And let's see here. What did you have any final thoughts about that type of situation, family and judgment and shame and all of that?
Yeah, only to emphasize that, our parents have this incredible power over us from the time that we're born. I mean, they are in control of all of our decisions up until we're about 4 or 5, and then they're still in control of most of our decisions long and long after that. And it can be very difficult to recognize that as adults, we have the power and responsibility over our own lives. And so often we can sort of default to that classic or that earlier model where we were dependent on them for all of our decision making. And so to recognize that we don't have to aggressively, angrily rebel at them like a bunch of, teenage punks, but that we really do have the opportunity to make our own choices.
I think it's also important to say, like on piggybacking on what you're saying is not just having that fallback of, relying on them for decisions, but also relying on them for guidance. Our parents may have our best interests at heart, but they were children once too, and they're not infallible and they're not, perfect.
Yeah, and the reality is some are much better than others, and that's okay. I'm not necessarily saying you should rank your parents, but it's okay to acknowledge that they may not just be imperfect in the way that everybody's imperfect, but that they may not be a great fit for your life, which is something I would say with some hesitance. You know, those are important relationships and not easily cast aside, but you always have the option and I think the responsibility to make your best choices rather than to assume anything.
I would agree.
I think we can probably break that down even more finely. I like that approach, Christy. I know that my parents were really good at advising me on finance. I would never ask them a question about sex because they were incompetent there.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense.
So there's some areas I think our parents are probably darn good at, and you know, you can almost build a relationship around those areas where you do value them and you do value their input. What I think every adult, from the time you turn 16, 18, every adult needs to start learning how to set boundaries with your parents, because the parents, it's hard for them. I'm a parent. I know it's hard. But you got to start setting boundaries gently but firmly. And the way you told Anthony earlier was a good way to do it. Dad, I'm going to let you tell, but then we're going to cut it off in 5 minutes and we're going to move forward. And that was a good approach.
Yeah, I agree. So our next call is going to be David in Houston, and he wants to talk about what are our thoughts on the new sex doll brothel opening up in Houston.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Tell me about it.
David.
I want all the details.
David, you are on the air.
Do you have like a discount code or never mind? Just tell us all about it, David. We're excited to talk to you.
Been on the news a little bit here lately in Houston that this sex robot brothel is planned. There's been some opposition from a Christian group called Elijah Rising. They're an anti-sex trafficking group, and they're also opposed to the robot brothel. They claim that it could teach men how to rape and stuff like that. It seems a little bit extreme to me. I'm just wondering what your thoughts were.
Well, I guess I am just stuck on the name robot brothel.
Yeah.
But that's just me. Yeah, Christians really do like to take it to extremes, don't they? On a personal level, if you just completely take out the whole argument about AI, honestly, I don't see an issue.
I just hope they clean them pretty darn good each time.
Run them through the washer.
Yeah, without getting into like Westworld.
Think about that. Like, why would people want to have sex with these robots as opposed to a real person? Is that some kind of fetish, or is that a fantasy? Or
it could be. It could also be. It could also be trouble with people and with relating to other people. I do know that there are plenty of people out there who would love to have an intimate relationship, but have extreme difficulties with interpersonal skills and other humans.
I mean, that may well be a component, but you can draw that same through line and ask, why would anybody choose to have sex with their hand or a vibrator or a dildo as opposed to a real person? And I think the answer is pretty straightforward, which, yeah, it may have to do with social anxiety and a difficulty in connecting with other people. It may be the simple fact that you are getting exactly what you want. It could be logistical. It's here, readily available, and always consenting. I mean,
there's probably a whole host of reasons for each person. Maybe the reason is different.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't want to get too deep into Westworld Season 3 spoiler territory here.
Oh, please don't.
But I do think that it's a very reasonable attraction in my mind. Now, logistically, whether or not it's a pleasant experience, I think has a lot to do with where we're at technologically and every other aspect of that. But the notion that it somehow is contributing to rape or human trafficking, I can't even draw a straight through line that isn't just sex is bad as a,
Right, and that's kind of where the whole, Christians really love to take things to extremes. if anything else, I would think that maybe it would be an outlet for some people who would maybe be doing other things that they maybe shouldn't.
You're suggesting that it could, if anything, potentially reduce violent expressions of sexuality.
I mean, if it's going to have an effect one way or the other, my guess is that it would have a positive effect on the landscape, not a negative one. But
I think there's reason to bear that out. I mean, I think that there is interesting statistics about the way that pornography is introduced into certain areas and how that affects sex crimes. And I'm not ready to extrapolate too much out from that, but
for
the
sure not.
research is pretty interesting, and it does seem to point towards what you're saying.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah.
One for the home team.
Dave, is your...
The place is called Kinky. It's going to be called Kinky's Dolls, by the way. It's out of Toronto, Canada.
But it's going to be in Houston. You know, we may have
they're
to
opening
take
up
a
a
field
place.
trip.
Road trip.
They're trying to. I think some of the city officials are kind of against it too.
Well,
I mean, their job is to get reelected.
Yeah.
You know, so that's it's a complicated thing, and
they're in
the
Texas.
voters are the voters, and not all the voters of the city of Houston watch our show. We wish that they would. We think they would learn something.
I know I am learning things.
You know, we're moving in this Dave, we're moving in this direction no matter what. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people, the Sybian has been out for 25 years, and there's lots of women that love their Sybian. And that's
I've seen Howard Stern.
Well, I haven't, but I've seen lots of Sybians, and you know, that's just that's one step above just a vibrator. It's a pretty darn effective vibrator from my opinion.
And
It's
when
elaborate.
they come for my vibrator, that's when it's going down.
I hope they get it. We'll see what kind of experiment it is in Houston.
Yeah, but hey,
Yeah, I'm kind of interested. Like the technology is maybe kind of primitive at this point. It's not going to be like Westworld, obviously. I don't think.
but you know, we very well may take a road trip at some point once this place opens, just to take a look.
Hey, I am very much open to that. It's a date.
Okay, awesome. Well, David, thank you so much.
And I
thanks,
guess
guys.
good luck with your zoning laws. Let us know how it goes.
There are no zoning laws in Houston. You know that.
There's truth to that.
Well,
All right.
thank you, David.
All right. Bye.
Bye. So yeah, I'm thinking road trip day.
Yeah, no question. You know,
I hadn't heard of it actually.
I think it might be. I mean, I'm sure that should this business succeed, that there will be incredibly
Expansions?
elaborate cleaning opportunities, and that will be well handled. It does feel like a BYO wet nap type situation.
Oh, I hope not. I really hope not. Oh God.
I mean, I might keep one. Like, I always have a condom in my back pocket because you never know.
Okay, this is true.
Might bring a wet nap too.
Oh, sorry.
you
I just
guys-
thought of a new type of it's like KY for your robot. Sorry.
Robot lube.
You know, even if this does or doesn't go through, the whole VR and 3D stuff is coming.
Yeah.
It's already here.
Yeah.
Just give it another 5 years, and you won't need to go to a robot brothel. You'll probably be able to do it in your own home.
I thought you were going to say to your girlfriend's house, but
Well, that too, maybe.
that possibly. So you ready for another call?
Yep.
All right. We have Tim in Indiana. He has a Catholic friend, unsatisfied and is thinking about divorce, would like our advice. Tim, you are on with Megan, Christy, and Darrel.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. I see you've want some advice regarding divorce?
Yeah, I had a friend come up to me last week and kind of bring this up at the last minute. I could tell it was something she had really had on her chest and kind of she had to tell someone. And I'd listened to her, and she was basically, I didn't have a whole lot on my end to say. I just kind of listened, and she kind of vented about not really being attracted to who she's in a relationship with, her husband, and not finding herself at a place in life she's satisfied with, and she's around all these other people and like finding qualities now as kind of the person she is today that she wasn't when she married her husband. And I didn't, like it's a serious topic and I don't have any expertise. So I was listening to you guys and thought this is a perfect opportunity to hear someone else what they think maybe when it comes up again, how can I help her out?
Yeah, this is so tricky. If you don't mind me jumping in a little bit, when I went through my own divorce, part of coming out of that situation and getting a little bit of perspective on it led to a lot of me pulling my hair and having some very serious conversations with friends where I was a little pissed in a lot of ways that they didn't say anything soon, that they didn't let me know that certain things I was experiencing weren't okay, and that they didn't have a stronger voice. And then a year later, I found myself in another not super healthy, great relationship. And a friend of mine sat me down and he said, how we had that conversation where you wanted me to tell you? And my immediate response was, shut up, what do you know about it? She's great. Which is only to say that it is a valuable thing to be able to offer good and honest and compassionate insight to somebody who is maybe in an unhealthy relationship. But do so with just the gentlest hand, because when you're talking about somebody's sexual or romantic relationship, if you're talking about a marriage, you're talking about something that is really, really precious and is pretty impervious to outside influence.
I think it's also important to note that your friend has come to you and has wanted to get this off of their chest, which means they're already thinking about it. That means it's already on the forefront of their mind, and it also means they know what they want. They probably are just looking for affirmation and support. Not to give too much of a personal situation away, but I can identify with this person very much, and to say if they have come to you with this, the best thing that you can do, I would say, is probably going to be support, and ask them, what do you want? What does your significant other want? Not what do other people think. What do you want? Are you happy? Are you not happy? List out the pros and cons on a piece of paper if it helps. But at the end of the day, they are already thinking about it. So it's not like you're coming into a situation where your friend is acting all, googly-eyed and crazy, and you want to step in and tell them to slow the fuck down. They are already coming to you with this, which means it's already it's already tipping over. Exactly. It's already unfolding in their mind. They just have finally said something about it. Okay. That's really... Go ahead.
That's usually a huge step when somebody admits that kind of thing to another human being that's not a spouse. Yep. So that's okay.
At the same time, I've had friends that have told me of their imminent divorce a half dozen times and are still, now describe themselves 10 years later as happily and wonderfully married, which is a bafflement to me. So I do think that there are some folks that hold everything very close to the vest, and then others that get into an argument with their significant other and then jump onto Facebook to immediately tell the world about it. So, recognizing a little bit of your relationship with them and how they feel and what you can expect, what you should hear when they speak, whether you can take everything that they say very seriously or whether it might just be a little bit of venting.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of helps a lot and gives me a little bit more ease thinking of what I can do. Yeah.
I'm glad, because I feel like everything we've said has been, well, it could be over here, or it could be all the way over here.
It depends on what kind of person they are.
So I'm glad that helps provide some clarification, even if we've given you
like
basically
four
answers that are the opposite of each other.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm slotting in what you guys are saying with kind of what I know of this person and how they've acted and how they've sounded when they've spoke, and so I'm kind of picking the one, the one that you've mentioned that matches that.
Well, good.
Well, just be a good friend and a good listener, and don't give them a lot of advice, if any. Don't even give them any advice. Just listen and ask good questions. That's what Megan's really saying, is ask good questions, and that will
help them figure it out on their own.
Be a buyer of coffee, a bringer of beer, a picker up of kids from school.
Purchaser of tequila, whatever works.
Whatever you can do to just be supportive.
Yeah.
And I've noticed if you just give a person like a few extra moments, they usually follow up when they want to say something, you know?
Sure.
And so sometimes that's all you need to do, is just let them have an extra space to keep talking what they want to tell you.
Yep.
Silence is golden in those situations.
Well, thank you very much. I had listened to the podcast, maybe like the first 20 episodes I found like a month ago, and I just started it, and you guys came up after AXP one time, and I was like, wow, that's great.
Hey, glad
I'm a fan.
We'll be moving to our regular time on Thursdays this week
at 7.
So we hope to see you then.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I will tune in then.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Yeah, that is a very tricky topic.
Yeah, I mean, people are only so open to hearing you tell them about their most intimate, personal aspect of their life.
Yeah, and it really is more about helping guide them to their own conclusions, not telling them what they should do. Because at the end of the day, do you want to hear, but you told me this, or, well, you asked me a question and I answered it with this. So, yeah, that's also a very, it's a very emotional, very fraught situation.
When people call in asking advice for somebody else, that makes me more nervous than almost any other kind of call.
Absolutely.
You have no idea, but the main thing is I think Tim could really be a valuable resource, but just being a good listener and non-judgmental about whatever she comes up with or decides.
For sure. So, Darrel, I think we are approaching the end of the show. Did you have any additional comments or suggestions for us today?
Well, yeah, I really would like to throw out to the listeners, go online and take our sex survey.
Hey!
And you'll be able to, it's really a fun survey and ask some really interesting questions. It's all anonymous. All we know is your answers. We don't know anything about the people actually taking it, but we need lots of people to take it. And you can go to secularscience.org and take the survey. It probably takes 20, 30 minutes at most to take.
We'll throw it up in the show notes.
Yeah, it took me about 20 minutes this morning, actually, and it's not boring. You know, it's good. It's research. It's for science. It's for humanity. But it's actually not a bad way to spend 20 minutes at the office.
Okay.
I mean, better than a BuzzFeed quiz. When I got to the end of it, I was really waiting to find out if I was a Charlotte or a Samantha.
Oh,
so that part was a slight letdown, but I get to know that
the answer
I'm
was
helping humanity. Well, we all know I'm a Charlotte. This has been established.
It'll be a few months before we have the results, but when we'll come back on here and talk about it.
Hey, I can't wait.
No, that would be awesome.
It'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, that's the main thing. And I do, just going back to our very first caller, I really hope people we have a gigantic amount of resources at the Recovery from Religion site on sexuality, on talking to your parents, talking to other people that are in your life that are religious. And I think Anthony Magnabosco's and street epistemology is excellent kinds of skills that we encourage. And I think anybody who's dealing with a family member, that's probably a good approach.
Mm-hmm. And I think I'd like to also throw out there Patreon. We have a Patreon, which is just Patreon/secular sexuality. We have a Facebook.
Yeah, just all these different ways to keep the conversation going. We would love to receive your emails. We would love to either answer questions on air or honestly off if there's something that we can help with. But we definitely want to hear from you in Facebook, through the email, through Patreon, through all these different ways.
Email is sex@atheist-community.org. And did you have geared up our topic for next week?
Yeah, so we're jumping into October.
Yes.
So we're going to be starting off on our regular Thursday night time slot, talking about religious horror stories.
And keeping in mind, not only will we be on our regular time slot, we will also be on our Secular Sexuality channel.
Yeah, our regular YouTube channel, youtube.com/secular sexuality. All that will be there in the show notes, but we really hope that you'll join us. I know it's asking a lot to get you twice in 1 week, but it's the type of relationship I like to be in.
I agree.
Too much? I'm getting the too much nod.
Twice a week, hey, Christy.
There's nothing wrong with a couple times a week. I mean,
when it's an hour and a half each time, I feel like that's
satisfied.
Yeah, I try to leave satisfied.
So, sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying what our topic is going to be.
Yeah, that we're going to be talking about religious horror stories, and having a good time as we can keep it rolling.
That sounds good to me. So, you know what?
Yeah.
Darrel, we have you on the line today. You can give your standard outro.
Right. Okay, well, as you know, I want you to go give yourself a big orgasm today, or give somebody else a big orgasm.
Hey! Thanks,
Yay.
guys.
Y'all have a great
Bye.
night.